If I had a crystal ball and I could look into this crystal ball and tell you guys exactly where your business opportunities lie looking forward, what is working in the future, what is not working in the future, things that we should totally eliminate, things that we should totally start doing in order to see your business grow and flourish. Imagine how amazing that would be. Guys, I don't have a crystal ball, but I do have the next best thing. We've recently just launched our opportunity analysis, and the entire premise of this exercise is to help you guys understand where the holes in your bucket currently lie. Why is that important? Because we don't want to start filling a bucket that's leaking. Guys, for a limited time only, I'm going to be offering this as a free giveaway. It's $350, but for you site shedders, you're going to get it for free. You need to head across to tradie.wiki/grow and enter the code SiteShed to get it for nothing. Off the back of it, book a time to have a chat and we'll see where it takes us. We're looking forward to helping you and seeing where your opportunities lie. Today's podcast has been proudly brought to you by Tradie Web Guys. Tradie Web Guys work with tradespeople only on their websites and marketing solutions to help them stand out from their competition. Everything from web design through to SEO, search engine marketing, content creation, you name it, guys. It is a customized solution for trade-based organizations and it's fantastic. Head across to tradiewebguys.com.au/apply, fill in the form and let's have a conversation.
Giving tradies and contractors around the globe the tools to run a modern business. You're listening to Toolbox Talks from the Site Shed. Now here's your host, Matt Jones.
Gabe, welcome to the Site Shed podcast.
Thanks for having me on.
All the way from Dallas, Texas.
Yep.
Are you a football fan?
Yes, I am. I'm a Cowboy fan. American football, right?
Sure. I've been told if you live in Dallas and you're not a Cowboy fan, you're pretty much ostracized.
Yeah. Well, that's half the reason I ended up in Dallas, actually.
Football?
Big fan. Yeah, I actually grew up in the rival territory, but grew up as a Cowboy fan and then wanted to go to school out here and then have stayed here ever since. So
wow.
Now I've lived in Texas longer than anywhere, so now I call it home.
Wow, there you go. Oh, well, we're not here to talk about football, thankfully, because I know very little about American football, but we are here to talk about small business, and you're from Field Pulse, which is a job management app. Do you want to give us a bit of a run through as to your background and how you ended up where you are?
Yeah, so I have typically more of a software and technology background, and so I was dealing with software and different apps for small businesses in my previous work. But it was really inspiration from dealing with different trades from my own home and seeing them not using technology and making mistakes or sitting on my floor and handwriting an invoice and then the math was wrong and then he had to redo it again. And so I really wanted to start something that was focused for the small trades businesses, that was easy to use, easy to implement, designed and priced for small businesses. Because I knew there were solutions for the larger end of the market, but I wanted something that was catered towards a smaller end that was very mobile friendly, because a lot of what you'll do is out in the field. Even if you own or manage a small business, you're typically out and about.
Sure. I mean, it's such a great space, this job management, field management solution these days. And I feel like you would know better than I, there's loads of them around, but I think the fact that people are using them is such a good turn of events for small trade businesses, or any trade business, to be honest. I mean, I know going back when I did my apprenticeship, many, many years ago, the old carbon copy notebook and Reese diary, those sort of things. That was basically how you ran the business. And if you lost your Reese diary, you pretty much were screwed. And it happened quite a lot. So I think now.
Yeah, I think, it seems like this is one of the last industries to really fully digitize, but it's happening. And I'm seeing a lot, especially in the last 2 to 3 years versus 5 or 6 years ago. I think it's just natural as more people are using technology for everyday life, for other aspects of their business. They're naturally going to move and adapt. And so
one thing I really do like about your software is that it obviously has a native integration with, a lot of our audience is Australian-based, a lot of our listeners and viewers are overseas, so this may not be as relevant, but I know that you do have an integration with Reese plumbing suppliers, which is amazing. So I'm guessing that essentially means they can pull pricing directly from the supplier, which is great.
Yeah, so we have a very close-knit partnership with the Reese Group. And so we are their preferred job management platform. We work with them all day, every day. We actually have a few of their team members on secondment working for us. So we're very close working with Reese to really provide their customers the the best experience. And like you said, the integration where you can pull in their items with your own custom pricing to create quotes, estimates, then send those off as purchase orders. And we're continuing to adapt on that. And we're building things like price books built on item lists so that you can complete the full circle. And so we're really working closely with them to bridge the gap between the job management part and the purchase order and supply part, so it's all seamless together.
Sure, and I can honestly tell you with my hand on my heart that because we deal daily with these conversations in our community, and we've spoken with loads of software companies in the past, and the ones that seem to have an open mind about integration and the ones that are willing to accept that people need to integrate, they're going to need to integrate with software, and they seem to be the technologies that are getting adopted faster and faster. There's a handful that refuse to, and I can see that they're going to get left behind because of that.
Well, ultimately, Reese is a pretty innovative company, despite being a very old supplier. They actually have a very large digital group, and it's growing, expanding pretty quickly. They're hiring pretty aggressively there to expand digital offerings. And so for them, they're looking at, okay, what are the threats today? What are the threats in the future? And they see things like Amazon and other digital platforms and online ordering. And so they want to look to continue to offer competitive things through their own platforms and through partners and through job management, and really give a great experience to their customers that's unrivaled. And that's the number one thing for them, is really a great experience. It makes customers love them and the brand they are today. And how can they do that even better?
Yeah, perfect. Well, I suppose within your dealings of, working with loads of businesses, you've obviously had plenty of exposure to the things that are done right and the things that are done not so right. I suppose today we want to talk a little bit about some of those things and, primarily the difference between running a small business and buying yourself a job at the end of the day. And I think there's that big myth, and that, people buy into this idea of, oh, I've got my own business, when in reality, they may work for themselves, but all they've really done is buy themselves a job where they've got to work more hours, deal with more things, throw more things on their plate. So there's a bit of a disconnect, I think, between what running a business or owning a business is and just working in a job,
Exactly. And it's not always for everyone. And some people find out the hard way. But if you go in planned and prepared about what it really takes to take it from a trade or a craft to a business, and going from someone who's working for another company where you're exchanging your time for what they're doing to then looking at it from a business standpoint, it's a big leap, and you really know what you need to what you're getting into. And that looks at all your costs, tracking profits, looking at margins, and really thinking like a business and not like you're owning a job or a wage. And so that starts with preparing just yourself when you're early on, because you're a sole trader typically, but you need to start operating and putting systems in place for then when you're ready to grow and add team members. Because ultimately, when you add team members, you eventually start to add overhead and other expenses. And so how do you grow those margins to cover that and create a business that's worth something? And you want to ultimately create a business that's not just you. You don't want to be the business. You want to create a business that is standalone and valuable. And maybe if you want to sell it one day.
Sure. Yeah, we've spoken a lot to this in previous episodes, and I think for the better part, we're kind of preaching to the choir here. Like anyone that's been listening to this podcast or watching this podcast for a while is sort of familiar with me ramming this stuff down their throat. But it's always good to hear other people's perspective on it. I think the biggest problem. Well, maybe it's a problem, or maybe it's not really a problem, but it's something that needs to be overcome for a lot of the listeners and viewers out there. Is you can be really good at your trade, which doesn't necessarily prepare you to how to run a business. And you see it all the time, these amazing tradespeople that just end up going broke because they think they're going to go into business and they have no idea how to run a business. So it's actually the reason why the site shed existed, because we wanted to bring all that together into a platform where we can bring people like yourselves onto, into a space where we can educate and we can give people the information they need in that space. The one cool thing I really love about technology is it kind of eliminates a whole bunch of those obstacles with one app. And so, it gets them in the space of, whether they know it or not, creating a system. It gets them in the space of understanding what their costs are. So, when you're integrating things like, flat book pricing and that kind of stuff, they understand what their actual overheads are and what their costs are and what they need to be charging. So that kind of helps the whole industry, because it keeps the prices up and it reduces people that are undercutting, so on and so forth. So I think there's very often a lot of serendipities that come from using pieces of technology, which may not be immediately obvious, but they certainly are present.
Yeah, I mean, it helps you put you in a position to do the right things that ultimately make you a better business. It's really hard to track costs and profits without something like this, where you're really adding all your line items that you're using, margin and everything to actually calculate your price, but then really looking at profit. A lot of businesses, and people won't admit it, they don't know what they're making on a job, and they'll look at what they started at the beginning of the month, what they have at the end of the month in their bank account. And if it's a good amount and they can clear it out, they'll call it a day and that it was successful. But you need to know, like, is this type of job making me money? Is that type of job making me money? Where do we struggle? How is this person performing compared to another person?
Sure.
And these are all things that you need to track and measure. And the measuring and tracking and reporting and data is very difficult without any type of technology.
Sure.
These are things looking at things like win rates and booking rates and conversion rates from quote to invoice. And especially as you grow and you start adding new team members, how do you measure whether they're good? And how do you measure whether they're the right people? And the reality is not everyone's going to be as good as you are. And not everyone's going to care as good as you are. And so you have to be able to measure and see how they're performing, especially against their peers, in critical aspects, especially if they're a type of business where you're either closing or upselling on the job. You need to see how it performs over time.
I mean, there's so many of those little variables that you just touched on there that become apparent as you start growing and scaling a business. And we're going through this at the moment. We're with obviously I don't work in the trade business anymore, but, with our developers and things like that, we're putting incentive schemes into place. And like some of those incentives are not things that you might typically look at as obvious. And so, one of them is, we want to make sure that you've got when a web project is launched, that there's a 90% customer satisfaction and feedback in our surveys. Little things like that, which, obviously you think, it's a developer, you just want to get it built and get it out on time, but it's not really what's important. Like there's other things that come into play. And we see this a lot in trade businesses. And that, what you just touched on before, when you're saying the ability to upsell and cross-sell, that can be both good and bad. And we've seen businesses have real problems with, putting incentive structures in place for businesses that are, for technicians that are encouraged to upsell. And they really cross a line when it comes to being ethical. And so they've had to reel it right back in and, have a smarter approach about it. And very often, the way that they will alleviate that and, bring a level scale to it is with the customer satisfaction feedback and making sure that the customer's happy, they're not getting callbacks, those kind of things, because it's not always about the dollar at the end of the day. Yeah. It's very rarely, to be honest, about the dollar. The reality is, what we see anyway, is if you can provide a good service and you keep your customers happy, then the dollar sort of comes a distant third.
Well, and I think the best businesses rely and grow on word of mouth and referrals. Ultimately, sometimes it might make sense to not do the heavy or hard upsell or cross sell to give them a better or best experience and then get great referrals down the road. Because people forget to sometimes look at customer acquisition cost, which is a huge thing to look at as a software company. But I think people forget about it often in the trades. How much do you spend to acquire this customer marketing? You might say, I'm spending $20,000 a month on Facebook, or $1,000 a month on Facebook, or $500, whatever it is. But you need to actually look, how much did that customer cost for me to acquire? And was it profitable? Did that go into my margin? And ultimately, word of mouth and referrals are basically free. And so maybe you're making a little bit less on the deal, but it's a chance to get a great referral that obviously gets you a lower customer acquisition cost.
And another example of that is, so one of our biggest initiatives at Tradie Web Guys lately over the last year or so has been, especially now because we're seeing so many changes within digital marketing landscape. So take, for example, the feud between Apple and Facebook and how the pixel's been taken away, blah, blah, blah. Like all these kind of, traditional retargeting methods and things like that people have been depending on, they've sort of been pulled from underneath them to a degree. And so we've seen so much value with our customers now in helping them build and re-engage with their database, with their customer list, similar to what you were saying there. Because for so many years, and I know for the life of me, I can never understand why, but there's just this churn and burn mentality when it comes to leads and customers, and it nearly always comes at the cost of their existing customers. And it's just insanity because we know, we've tested it, like you're 8 times more likely to retain a client than to gain a new one. And we've been able to prove this just by setting up re-engagement campaigns with people. It's just insane. We're just booking them out for months based on, and it's costing them essentially, a fraction of what they were spending on Google Ads. We've had one client who is spending $250,000 a year in Google Ads, and we're hoping to completely remove his Google Ads campaign within the next 12 months, just based on engagement through his newsletters.
Yeah, no, I agree with you, because it can be a dangerous game to play when things change too. Google changes things a lot, especially if you rely on SEO or anything like that. It's great to have, but I really think tapping into your own customer base and network can be more consistent, short-term and long-term. And you never know when the paid landscape changes too, or the pixels, like you said. And if you're relying solely on a channel that is maybe prone or possible to change, it can be damaging when a change does happen and you're not ready to rebound off of it. So re-engaging your customer list, using them to build a network and get referrals, I think is huge for trade businesses.
And the thing is, and the reason why earlier in the conversation I was touching on integrations, it's because the reason I'm so passionate about that is because we, obviously, when we are setting up re-engagement campaigns for trade businesses, if they are using technology which captures things like first name, last name, email, and phone number, if that software integrates and we can integrate it with the email marketing, programs that we use, then most of the heavy lifting is already done. And so it's a really easy way for us to go, what software are you using? Oh, okay, great. We can work with that, and when we can integrate that with our tool, and we can set up your re-engagement campaigns. It's not a big deal. And so that's coming full circle. That's why we're so passionate about guys using technology and using the right technology, because we know that we can add a lot of value in that space through integrating softwares that can really turn the needle, move the needle.
Yeah, and ultimately you're automating it, right? So you're collecting the information, it's going into your email list, and then they're going through probably some type of drip or marketing campaigns, and you can have it running for a long time. I think the great thing about trade and service businesses is that some of them are recurring, but even ones that are one-off, eventually down the road, you want to be that point of contact when they need you again. And there's different ways of being top of mind, but you want to be the one that they think of, like, okay, I have an issue with XYZ. This is the company I've dealt with before, or I remember seeing their emails every now and then, whatever it is. Some people put stickers on the equipment. If it's something they service, like HVAC, they'll put their company stickers, or
magnets or something.
Plumbing, or on the continuous flow heater, stuff like that.
And that's, again, one of those things, I suppose, where being front of mind, that whole landscape that we were talking about before, where it might have been dependent on any one business or a number of businesses in the past, like Facebook or like Google Ads or whatever it might have been. Now it might seem like it's doom and gloom, but actually we're seeing it has large advantages, because it's putting the power back in the hands of the business owner, in the sense of you can really start controlling what you control. You can really start taking control of what it is you're in control of, which is like your website and your database. And for years that's kind of been neglected, and people have just sort of been, I wouldn't say leveraging, but maybe being too dependent on things they don't have enough control of. And now we're saying, well, you can actually take control back by putting this, emphasis into your website. And you can do things like you're saying, about being front of mind. We see that the great way for trade businesses to become front of mind is, and whether they know it or not, they are in the education space. Like, people are coming to them for information, and they have a responsibility to, whether they're doing it or not, they have a responsibility to give people that are coming to them that information. And so, a great way to build trust and rapport and to be front of mind with these, potential customers or existing customers when they're coming to them is by educating. And it's kind of a paradigm shift from that, back in the day when we just used to think email marketing or whatever was all about just ramming a promotion down the customer's throat. Like, people's bullshit filters are up these days, and they see right through that, So we see so much value from helping businesses build a nice content strategy and being able to distribute content through email marketing and through perhaps social channels or whatever it might be. But the whole point, the whole purpose is really to put them on a pedestal next to their competitors, like things that their competition are not doing or they're not showcasing, and basically getting that information out there and making it public and doing it through their website, because they own and control their website.
I really think next level content. So I see a lot of people kind of doing surface level content, but if you can really do next level content that really shows true expertise, it can really set you apart, because how do people build or get trust in you, be the right person? If you show that expertise, that you know how to do it right, you know what to look out for, things like that, you can showcase that in content or videos or however, they'll trust that, okay, if I hire this person, they know what they're doing. And sometimes it's just even talking about what you would do on the job, even if the customer can't necessarily perform it themselves. So not necessarily saying like a DIY assistance, but it's like, this is how we fix this solution. And really going through the steps of, okay, we take this precaution here, and maybe others don't. And really showing that expertise, I think always can go a long way. And I think it's also a great sales tactic if you're in front of the customer, is really showcasing what you do, how you do it. And sometimes it can even be industry standard things, but if you're educating the customer on the process, then they get more trust in you knowing what to do. And that's just what I've seen, and works in different industries, but I think it works super well in the trade.
Yeah, no, definitely. And again, it's just a way that you can showcase your expertise and build that trust and rapport. And we see it being really powerful across all trade businesses, but especially in trade businesses that have a longer sales cycle, so if they're like plumbers that work on, big, large properties or large projects, or if they're builders that work in, home renovations or home builds or whatever it is, like it's very rare that you're going to get customer come to you for a renovation and say, oh yeah, let's go. Can we start tomorrow? And for the better part, no builders are going to be able to facilitate that anyway, because for the better part, they're all booked up months in advance. But, being able to educate and nurture that person, that contact or that lead from the point where they initially inquire or they come to you for information, first of all, right through to when they sign on the dotted line, that could be 2 years or more, So how proactive are you being throughout that time period of, like you say, staying front of mind and, being present?
I think one of the biggest mistakes we see is that people think, okay, I'm going to go out, I'm going to collect the information I need, I'm going to give them a quote or an estimate, and then if they like it, they're going to call me and hire me. Like, yeah, sure, you'll win some business, but a lot of the business you'll earn will be because you were the cheapest. But then how do you win the business where you're not the cheapest, where everyone's the same? And that's making that difference in the education aspect and really standing out. And I think people have an issue also sometimes selling, but I think it's just a natural part of it. You need to sell why you're better. And that starts through the whole process from the beginning to the end, especially if you can start educating them on what you're doing and how you do it better.
And the thing as well is, like, when you do present yourself as an expert in a certain area or niche or vertical or whatever you want to call it, of your industry, it does put you in a position of expertise, and it does put you in a position where you can charge more because you are seen as an expert within that area. And you see it all the time with, just take plumbing, for example. If you're a pipe relining specialist, you can charge for it. If you're a hot water specialist, you can charge for it. There's so many little niches within industries, even like pipe freezing and all these kind of things. Like there's so many avenues there where you can own that space. And I think very often, and understandably too, I've been there. When you're starting out, you try and you just want to pay the bills and you'll take anything you can get. But I think over time, you find you can really start understanding and largely through data. And I'll loop back into this in a second, but you really understand where your strengths are and where your weaknesses are, and some of those things may be financially based, but some of them may also be resource based. And we had we were dealing with a client not so long ago who was a plumbing business out in Western Australia, and they had a commercial division and a residential division. And 80% of their income and revenue was coming through their commercial division. So they were doing like working for builders and that kind of stuff. But it was only generating something like 15% of their profits.
Oh, wow.
And so we presented the data to them and said, this is the situation. Your profit margin over in the residential is huge. It's massive, but you're putting all of your resource and all of your everything into your commercial division, which is keeping the guys busy and it's keeping the work coming in. Don't get me wrong, but like if you put, it's insanity looking at this in paper. If you remove commercial and you applied the same resource to grow your residential division, your profits are going to be through the roof. And by just having that clarity and perspective on it, it was a bit of a revelation for them.
No, definitely. And I agree 100% with the specialization aspect as well. I'm a big fan of specialization, really for the same reasons you said, is that when you are the expert, you can charge more for it, right? If you're really in anything, if you're, like you said, if you're a hot water specialist or gas fitter, and you're hiring between someone who specializes in that or someone who does all type of plumbing, you're going to trust the guy who does it all day, every day, because he's done it so many more times. And so because of that, you can charge a premium. And I think people fall into the trap of not wanting to close down their total addressable market. Mm-hmm. And it's understandable. So they try to start broad, but then it's a matter of competing more on price versus kind of the value. And then ultimately, I think when you specialize, you also get better at what you're doing and you become more efficient. You become more knowledgeable at how to do it more cost effectively without compromising quality. And so as long as the market is still large enough for you, specializing really has a great value add in terms of how you present your offerings. And if you go too large, then you're also not trustworthy that you can perform the specific task, because like, wait, you were just doing this complete opposite work. And we see some of those too, is that people come into kind of this very generic like construction business where they take a lot of different type of work, but they're not really like a true GC or a builder or construction company. They'll somewhat act like a sub with their own crews, but they're doing a bunch of kind of random jobs. And they'll win jobs, they'll win work, but if you're not specialized in something, you typically end up competing on price.
Yeah, I think, and it's a hard thing to communicate to a small business starting up, but from a marketing point of view, when people come to us and they say, "Oh, we're plumbers and we do everything," and it's like almost impossible to market and be competitive in that space because it's just so many things. Whereas if they do have a niche in a vertical, we do pipe relining or we do whatever, it's like, oh, perfect, easy, because it's just so much easier. It's so much easier to market. And it doesn't necessarily mean that you can't do the other things, but the idea is you get your foot in the door and then you educate, right? So, oh, by the way, we also do blah, 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 blah. And, then you can add things in there. But the reality is if you don't have a way of getting your foot in the door, then it's almost impossible to, educate them about all the other things that you can potentially offer. So a bit of food for thought for you guys out there that are in that space, just what's the easiest way you can get your foot in the door with the service that you guys are really good at offering? And then once you're in there, start cross-selling.
Yeah, because ultimately, and we preach this across the board, is that you don't want to compete on price. And I think that's a huge obstacle for the industry in general. I think there are companies that kind of depress the market a bit as well by underpricing. And as a whole, it needs to be uplifted. The margins need to be at a sustainable business model. And there are people that undercut price to win jobs that ultimately hurt businesses trying to run at a true business margin.
Sure. I mean, I don't think that's ever going to change. There's always going to be business. I mean, this is relevant to any industry or vertical, but there's always going to be businesses that come in there and we go through this all the time. Like people, even last night, there was someone, "Oh no, why is this, somewhat this much more than this guy in relation to marketing packages?" And I was like, I don't know what they're doing. I don't really care. This is, but the thing is, when you know what you do and you understand the process and you can help, and the key is helping people understand the process, right? Like again, like this customer will very likely go ahead, even though we're twice as expensive in one of these products that they were looking at, based on the fact that we're able to give them information and show them the process. And we'll say, well, this is why we charge this. This is what we do. And they're like, oh, actually, this isn't even an apples for apples conversation. You guys are doing all this stuff and they're just doing this. So,
but do you find contractors have issues or have trouble explaining and showcasing what makes them different or better value?
I definitely have problems with it, and that it's very often a mindset and a thought process. I'll give you an example. So builders, right? Builders have this ongoing issue with the amount of work and time that they put into preparing a bid or a proposal or a quote.
Yeah, definitely.
So So, and if they're doing it properly, and this is an obstacle that we ran into years ago with clients. He was like, I would literally spend 2 weeks preparing this proposal, and the customer would just take it, give it to the next builder and say, here, can you beat this by 10%? And all the work's been done. And so it led in, and this conversation's been going on for years now, but the whole conversation around charging for quotes.
Yeah.
And one of the big paradigm shifts is, well, like when you're comparing apples to apples, like, well, this guy's quotes are free and yours are $2,000. And so straight away, when you kind of compare a quote to a quote, and you're like, well, your quote's free, yours are $2,000. I'm just gonna go for the free one, because people don't understand that this quote is so much different. So how do you market that quote as being something completely different? So for a few of our clients, we came up with the idea of, instead of saying, well, this is a quote, we say, we don't actually do quotes. What we do is a detailed project analysis. And that project analysis costs $2,000, but this is what you get out of it. And straight away, you've removed you're comparing apples to oranges.
Yeah, I like that.
So
maybe some educational aspect within your project analysis too.
Well, and to be fair, they are like, it is literally a package where the homeowner could take it and give it to the next builder and they can go and do it. And so they say, listen, the reason we do this is because it's a super comprehensive, super detailed breakdown of your entire project, everything from, hour allocation, staffing, materials, like you name it. And the reason that we charge $2,000 for it is because if you decide that you don't want us to go ahead with the build, you can just take this and give it to another contractor, and they can go and they can run straight off it. We've done all the hard work for them. And they said, but if you do want to go ahead with us, we just deduct it off the cost of your project, or off the cost of your job. Yeah. So that's a really good example of how it's essentially the same thing, but you're spinning it a different way. And another example would be, if we've got,
I like that.
We have this happen literally all the time with all of our marketing clients, when we say, because every month we're busting their balls because we want information about projects or jobs that they've done, so we can showcase it on their website, so we can send it out in their newsletters, so on and so forth. And very often they'll be like, oh, we haven't done anything interesting this month. And I'm like, oh, okay, well, what have you done last week? Give me an example. Nothing, just block drains. Oh, really? Well, give me an example of one. Where was one? What did you do on a Wednesday? Just a block drain down in Kirribilli. I'm like, Kirribilli down on Sydney Harbour on the waterfront. Yeah. Down in the heritage listed area. Yeah. Right down near where the Prime Minister lives, right around there. Yeah. Overlooking the Opera House and the Harbour Bridge, right? Yeah. So all of a sudden they've gone from this thought pattern of all I did was clear a block drain to now a marketing piece where we're able to prevent the sewer from overflowing in a heritage listed building in Sydney's iconic waterfront location down in Kirribilli, right next to Kirribilli House where the Prime Minister lives. Like, it's the same shit, but it's a completely different spin on it. So, it's just taking the blinkers off sometimes. And that's a hard thing sometimes for business owners to understand, because the problem that we see is they think what they're doing is boring, and they think what they're doing no one has an interest in. But the reality is people are coming to them, like I said earlier, for information, and they have a responsibility to give them information and give it in a way that's appealing and attractive so that it showcases expertise. And there is the biggest issue I think that businesses have is they think that, well, because and we all do this, I'm sure, in our business, all we do is build websites, all we do is do marketing. But the reality is, for somebody that's interested in that service, it's super, super interesting and they want more information on it. And so the way you spin it becomes paramount, because it really helps you, it really defines you from, somebody that hasn't put that effort in.
Yeah, I feel like the businesses that do more cosmetic type of work, things that are pretty, it's always easier to showcase your work, because you're like, oh, look at this great thing we built or did. But that doesn't mean you can't showcase work when it's one of the dirty type of work or whatever, showcasing how you did it and what the effect was. And maybe you need to rely more on content that's like videos, because you're showcasing the action rather than necessarily the end result. But there's always a way to be able to kind of showcase your work and really demonstrate how you do things and why you do things the right way.
I mean, there's dozens and dozens of examples like that I could run you through, from electricians that all I did was, change some LED light, change the lights in their house to LED, like big deal. And I'm like, oh, great. So you reduce their energy consumption by 50% a month. And like there's all these different spins on it. Or landscape gardeners, nothing. I just moved their rose bush because it wasn't getting the right sunlight. It's no big deal. I'm like, oh, really? So you're able to extend the life of their their roses for an extra a month a year or whatever it might be. There's all these little spins that people just sometimes have their blinkers on when they're looking at it, and they just think, oh, it's not always obvious.
So I'm curious, from your point of view, on websites, do you find that often contractor websites are too generic and don't show enough of the reality of their business, whether it's from media, videos, photos, content, of what they're actually doing versus kind of stock imagery? We do this type of work, call us.
Stock imagery is the bane of my existence. And like, don't get me wrong, it serves a purpose, but for us, we always look at stock imagery as a means to get a website live so we can index it, and with the hope of changing those images out as soon as we can. And if I'm honest, it's the hardest thing to get from customers is updated images, because we will say, well, we do it all the time. We've got like a huge repertoire of, depository of all these of photos that we can use for websites, but they're stock images. Like, they're not the clients. And we'll build a website where clients have given us photos and we put it next to a website with stock images, exactly the same website. And one of them just looks like, a shitty website with stock images, and one of them looks like an amazing business website that tells a story.
Yeah.
And so, these are things, and we say this all the time, there are things that we can do for customers. Like, there is loads of things we can do for you. We can build the website. We can put all best practice into that. We can write your content for you. We can do what we can articulate in a way that tells your story, blah, blah, blah. But there are things that we can't make up. We can't be there to take your photos. We don't know your story. We don't know your team bios. Like, there are things that you have to come to the party with if you're trying to put a face to your business. And that's essentially what we're doing today. Like, we're trying to put a face to the business, because gone are the days where you can try and attack business or have like a service-based business that looks like a big white collar business. No one wants to deal with that anymore. Everyone wants to deal with a business that has a face to it, has a business that, this is Tom, he's coming out to your job today, read a bit about his bio, bang, team bio. Like, things like that make a big difference. They lower resistance, they improve, they lower the barrier of entry. People need to consider the fact, like, small things like, okay, if I'm sending a technician out to the house, then, if it's a mum there with her baby, and, there's someone rocks up in a beaten up old, truck with, messy uniform with blue glue all over it, with a coffee in one hand and a cigarette in the other hand, going, oh yeah, I'm here to clear your bock drain. Like that's a huge, whether it's obvious or not, like, subliminally, that mother is going to be opening the door going, oh my God, I don't want to let this person in my house. Whereas, if they've got an email that comes out an hour before saying, hey, this is Tom, he's coming out to your home, here's a bit of a bio, a bit about him, here's a photo of him, here's a little video, that he's recorded on things he likes doing outside of work, blah, 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 and he rocks up and he looks professional and the truck's clean and blah, blah, blah. Like, all these things are there to improve the overall experience of that customer, a lower resistance, make them feel more comfortable. And then, so the mother's like, oh, actually, I've just seen him, I've just read about him. Oh, Tom, I hear you like water skiing, blah, 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 whatever it is, come on in, like, all these things make a huge difference, and people overlook it and they see it as, fluff, but it's really not.
No, people like to see real people. They like to see the people who are the business. And I think people don't realize how much people actually care. I say people 100 times, but how much people actually care about family-owned businesses too.
Sure.
And seeing that aspect, which is super common in the trades, obviously, family-owned businesses, and people love that. And if you have that, showcasing that, I've seen some people show their family on the site, and some people absolutely love that. And just showing faces, showing real people in the company really puts an identity on it, and something that people actually resonate with, versus if you try to go too corporate-y and too clean and not show people and hide behind that, I just don't think it resonates the same in this market as a very personable website.
I mean, we work with loads of, especially building companies, who've tried to go down that white collar sort of approach, and we've basically flipped it all on its head and moved it back into that smaller business sort of appearance where there's a face to it and so on and so forth, because it's just a better experience. And of course, like, people, when you've got that kind of business, people like that whole white collar sort of perspective comes across as expensive. Like people just look at it and go, "Ooh, don't know about that. That looks really expensive," Whereas if for whatever reason, it must be a subliminal thing. I'm not sure, but the reality is, if you can come across as sort of a family-owned smaller business, then typically speaking, that first barrier of entry, which is, "Ooh, that might be too expensive," it's sort of overcome, which is
especially if you're owned by an entity that's super profit driven, like if you're owned by private equity or something like that.
Sure,
that's going to come off as, they're bottom line driven first, while a family business, I think you're still focused on making profits, but it tells a different story, and it's not always all about that.
Totally.
Typically, you also care more about the employees and the people and the customer experience and your name in the space and everything. And people get that, and it resonates with them when you showcase that on the site.
And there's a lot of we get a lot of stupid objections to things. And like I test, I can tell you right now, our most successful Facebook ad, which we run today, is me sitting on the couch with my daughter looking up at a camera. And this is ads to get people into our community. It's the best ad that we've run by at least 2x. Yeah. And we say, put a face to the business. People go, "Oh no, I don't want to do that in case somebody knows, what I look like and they can hunt." I mean, people think that their business is like some super top secret MI6 operation. Like, you're freaking plumbers and electricians. Like, just suck it up and do it. And I say this to guys all the time. Stop fabricating these bullshit excuses. Like you touched on before, video is a great way to communicate. The amount of objections I get and pushback on, I don't like talking into my camera, into my phone. This is a fabricated objection and fear that people have made up in their head, and it's preventing them from getting these amazing results. And it's completely bullshit. And I say it all the time. Like they could sit there and they could talk to their customer face to face about what they do, and they can communicate with absolute accurately and perfectly articulate, what it is they're going to be doing. And then as soon as you hold up a camera for some reason, they clam up and they can't do it properly. And it's like, the only difference is if you do it on your phone and you screw it up, you can delete it.
Yeah. True.
So it's fine.
People have a fear of that. Actually, if you look on our website, I'm currently in the hero image at the beginning. I got put up on that. I don't know if it'll stay there or not. We'll see. But it's the same thing. I mean, we're real people, and we want people to know that we're real people that will interact and want to help. And I think that's a modern trend that is powerful, because people want to deal with real people. Like you said, showcasing your child as well. It's a good story.
I feel like this conversation could go on for days. We probably should start reeling it in, but it's good to hear that this perspective is across markets in different locations and different areas. I feel like we're preaching a very similar thing.
But I think it resonates even more in the trades than almost anywhere else, because people really love a family business and the story that goes along with that.
Well, I mean, in the trades as well, it's one of the few businesses where you're, knocking on doors and letting strangers into your home. So, yes. Whatever you can do to lower that barrier of resistance, is super important. So,
I agree with that.
That's kind of the difference between a, traditional business where you might walk into a shop or whatever,
or an online business, right? Where it's
sure.
There isn't that threat or danger quite the same. So, no, giving the right image is important when you're coming into their home. I didn't even think about that.
Anyway, mate, this has been great to talk. I mean, as I say, there's probably loads of things we could have dived into here. I know we've got a few notes. We haven't really touched on any of them because we've just been going off on this tangent. But I think it's all relevant. I mean, obviously, I think what you were saying earlier about understanding your true costs and making sure that you're presenting them in a way which is making you profit. I mean, that conversation could go on for weeks alone. I'm not sure if you're familiar with the Profit First methodology or the book. That's been a huge revelation to our business and to a lot of our community. And I encourage you guys, if you haven't yet read that book, go and read it, because it really is amazing. We'll put some links to that in the show notes again. But we did an entire podcast on Profit First for Tradies with a lady that wrote a book on it for tradespeople as well. So again, that whole thing is just about understanding, how to allocate funds and where to allocate them, and making sure the business always has enough money. So you never you're never without when you need to pay bills and expenses and just accounting for everything. So that's been super useful. But then as well, going back to this, softwares like yours, understanding, okay, well, this is what the product is costing me. This is the margin I want to put on it. This is the final price. Like just having technology that takes care of that for you just saves you so much time and effort. And it's a funny thing, we've noticed this with technology over the years. Like we resell Google Workspace, or formerly G Suite, and we do that really as a convenience for customers because we know that it just eliminates dozens of headaches, which not having that software set up would, businesses will encounter. And we know because we encountered it. And when you set up a new business with that, the funny thing is they never really understand what business was like before it. And it's the same thing with job management and even like cloud bookkeeping software like Xero or, QuickBooks or whatever you guys are using. Like businesses that started from scratch with these tools, they have no idea about how shit life is without these tools. And it's almost comical. Like, and I say to guys, you just live in a freaking bubble. You have no idea what life was like without these things. Just never having to worry about your emails working, never having to worry if your computer blows up and all your data information is saved in the cloud. Like,
or you lose your diary, right?
Or you lose your diary, or you spill coffee on it and it spreads the ink everywhere, like all this kind of shit. Like people have no idea these days, and it's good because they're using the tools, and it's good because they never have to go through these problems. But I would just say to you guys out there, if you are not using technology, within your business, you are just missing out massively. And as soon as you start, you'll never go back. And it's like the penny drop moment of, and the biggest feedback we get is like, I just hate myself for not doing this earlier. I'm sure it would be very similar to Field Pulse.
Well, and what's interesting is that we see a lot of the younger generation, and if they're starting the business, they just automatically gravitate to software too. They say, okay, I'm going to need a software because it's become kind of standard operating procedure in life in general, where people previously kept their calendar in a physical calendar. People now put it in their own phone, for your personal life, everything. And so now it's kind of natural to look for applications and software to manage their business when they started. But it's not always, sometimes it's daunting for people to jump in. So you need to take it piece by piece. But it's a platform that can really transform how you run your business. And whether your goal is to grow your business, it makes it much easier to scale. Or sometimes it's just saving time to go fishing on Fridays and cutting down your work week.
Sure.
It really just helps you in any direction you want to take your business.
I think as well that for you guys that are out there thinking, oh, I'd love to use some of these tools, but they just cost too much money. You guys, if you put into perspective the amount of time and money it's costing you not to use these tools, it's like a drop in the ocean at the end of the day. And like you say, even if the software is costing you $100 a month, if it's costing you $1,000 a month and it's saving you, 20 hours, a month in labor, then it's worth it. Like you got to put some perspective on, what your time's worth and what you could be doing with that time if you didn't have to sit there and spend 4 hours in the office every night invoicing and chasing bills.
I think there's a million ways to quantify it, from cost savings, from time to increasing your booking rate, your win rate with jobs, better customer experience that gets you more referrals. Just across the board, there's a million ways it pays for itself, but you have to invest in tools that make you successful. Ultimately, you invest in the physical tools to do your work, and we don't view software as any different.
Sure. Gabe, let's wrap this up. I appreciate your time, and I appreciate it's probably getting a bit late over there, so you probably got things to do before you wrap up for the day. So you're from fieldpulse.com in the US and .com.au over here in Oz. And if anyone wants to reach out to Gabe on social, they're at fieldpulse. And Gabe's email is gabe.pinchev, Pinchev, at fieldpulse.com. Do we have an affiliate offer for you guys? I don't know if I've got that down here.
Yeah, we can put something together if the team hasn't yet. So
cool. So
there's a discount.
There'll be a bit of a discount for you guys out there if you want to check out Field Pulse, and I encourage you to, definitely. So again, having it integrate natively with Xero is a huge green flag for me. And the fact that you guys are open to integrations, I think, is obviously puts a lot of long-term perspective on the potential of that software fitting into your ecosystem, guys. So make sure that you check that out. Gabe, any closing comments?
No, just thanks for having me on. It was a pleasure.
Right on. That's a wrap. Thank you for listening to another episode of Toolbox Talks. If you're liking what you hear, then you can head across to the siteshed.com where you can join our community by signing up to our Toolbox Talks. You'll get sent a weekly notification, which is basically a highlight of everything that we've spoken about during that week, along with any other industry news that may be relevant or specific to the trades. If you're enjoying the show, you can head across to iTunes, Stitcher, or SoundCloud, where you can leave us a review. That would be fantastic, and all the reviews get read out in the show. Likewise, if you have any friends or colleagues that you think would benefit from the show and the episodes that we create, then please go ahead and share it with them.